Maomao had her old man. She was Liu Humen's daughter and she was perfectly happy that way. That man was not the only one responsible for her. In fact, she was grateful to him for that. She had no memories of her mother, only of a terrifying demon. As for how Maomao felt toward Lacan, she might hate him, but she did not resent him. He was clumsy in some ways, but not malicious. He could be a bit overdramatic when he reacted to things. If someone needed to be forgiven, at least one person had more reason to resent him than Maomao did. Perhaps the madam had forgiven him by now, she thought. She wondered if the man had noticed the letter in the box with the rose. It was the biggest offering Maomao could make to her father. If he had not noticed, that was fine. Let him buy her pleasant courtesan sister. That might be happiest for everyone. I cannot help thinking it certainly looked like you hated him. That is simply because you do not know him very well yet, Master Jinshi. When Maomao had been trying to get into the ceremony, Lacan had helped her. She thought he had a feeling something would occur. He did not need to examine scenes and collect evidence like Maomao did to foresee what was coming. He simply seemed to know these things naturally. His guesses were rarely wrong. Maomao asked, "Has he never wheedled you into looking into a matter you otherwise would?" Jinshi fell quiet at that. From the way he then whispered, "So that's what that was," she presumed she had guessed correctly. Maybe he was also the reason Lehaku had investigated Suhari so quickly, and the Board of Justice had responded to her so efficiently. The one problem with that man was that despite causing everyone else so much trouble, he never seemed to want to help himself. Just imagine what might happen if he were willing to take a public stand every once in a while. Perhaps that resurrection drug would already be within reach. The thought pained her immensely. He did not understand what genius he was blessed with. Few people in the whole country received such open and fervent praise from her old man. Maomao recognized this feeling. It was jealousy. "It might be impossible to make him a friend," she said, "but I suggest you do not make him an enemy either." She almost spat the words, then she held up her left hand and looked at her pinky finger. "Master Jinshi, do you know something? What is it? If you cut off a fingertip it will grow back. Must you say that while I am eating?" He gave her an uncharacteristic glare, reversing their usual positions. "One more thing then." "Yes, what? If that man with his monocle ever told you to call him Papa, how would you feel?" Jinshi paused for a moment and looked deeply disturbed, another unusual expression for him. "My goodness," Sugen said, putting her hand to her mouth. "I suppose I would want to tear that stupid monocle off his face and shatter it. I expect so." Jinshi seemed to understand what Maomao was getting at. He whispered a question, asking if it was difficult to be a father. Standing beside him, Gaeshun's face showed a touch of grief. Perhaps something in the conversation had struck a nerve. "Is something the matter?" Maomao asked. Gaeshun gazed up at the ceiling. "No," he said softly. "Just remember that no father in the world wants to be reviled." Well now, Maomao thought, but she brought her spoon to her mouth, determined to finish the last of her congee. Epilogue: several days after Maomao returned to the rear palace, a letter from Maomao arrived, along with a package. The letter clearly stated whose contract had been bought out and by whom. It must have been raining when she wrote it, because the page was streaked with droplets. A lovely scarf, the kind courtesans use for celebrations, was in the small case that accompanied the letter. Maomao was about to close the case again, but she decided to reconsider. She walked over to a chest of clothing. This chest was one of the furnishings in her small room. She started digging for something at the very bottom. The lights of the pleasure quarter glittered in the distance. Maomao thought the lights looked even brighter and more numerous than usual. From atop the outer wall of the rear palace, she could hear jangling bells. She imagined courtesans dancing with their scarves. They would wear their most beautiful outfits, wave long flowing cloth and scatter flower petals. Being bought out of a contract was a cause for celebration. When the entire city bloomed for one woman, the other flowers would dance to see her off. There would be wine and feasting, singing and dancing. The pleasure district never slept, so the carousing would continue all night. As for Maomao, she had the gossamer scarf Maomao sent her wrapped around her shoulders. She grasped it with her fingers. Her left leg still wasn't quite right, but she thought she could manage this. She removed her overrobe and dabbed a touch of rouge on her lips. She had received that from Maomao as well. It feels like some kind of joke. Maomao thought of Princess Fayu. She had been married to a military officer the year before, an old friend of Maomao's. Had the princess forgotten her days in the rear palace, or did she sometimes remember dancing on these walls night after night? Now Maomao would do the same thing as the princess. She wore the lovely dress her sisters had chosen for her. She remembered the first steps of the dance she had learned long ago. She had rouge on her lips, a gift from her sister Maomao. Small bells were attached to her sleeves. She jingled with each movement she made. Small stones were sewn into Maomao's long skirt. This made it billow out each time she spun. Her skirt circled around her. Her scarf traced an arc, her sleeves slipped through the air. She let her hair down tonight, decorating it with a single rose. It was a small flower dyed blue. The scarf danced. The skirt rose in time. Sleeves and hair fluttered together. She didn't think it would come back to her so easily. She was surprised to find the dance the old woman had taught her still within her. Her scarf billowed again. Then Maomao found herself looking directly at a very unwelcome companion. That was when she tripped on her skirt. She fell face first, and as she tried to protect herself from striking the ground with her nose, she tumbled straight toward the edge of the wall. She just managed to stop herself and someone pulled her up. What are you doing here? The unexpected visitor asked, breathing hard. His hair, which had been carefully bound, was now a mess. I should ask you the same question, Master Jinchi, Maomao said, brushing off her dress. Why are you here? He fixed her with an exasperated look. She was safely away from the edge of the wall now, but for some reason he was still holding on to her hand. Where else was I supposed to be? I had to come deal with the matter when I heard a strange woman was dancing on the wall again. And I thought I had kept a low profile. Now Maomao thought about it, though maybe it shouldn't have been so surprising that she was noticed. Did this mean the guards still believed in ghosts? Jinchi said, I'll thank you not to add to my workload, and he placed his hand on Maomao's head. Surely you didn't have to come yourself, Master Jinchi. Couldn't you have sent someone else? She slid her head aside, moving it out from under his hand. Jinchi said, a very kind guard recognized your face and contacted me directly. Maomao touched her face. She said, you may think what you're doing is innocuous, but remember that it won't look that way to those who see you. As you say, Maomao replied. She was somewhat embarrassed and scratched her cheek. This whole endeavor was harder than she'd thought. That's my story, Jinchi said. Now it's your turn. What are you doing here? After a moment, Maomao replied in the pleasure quarter, we danced to send off a courtesan who has been bought out of her contract. My celebratory outfit arrived this very day. In truth, she had wished to send off the courtesan who had given her the clothes. Maomao had stuck with Maomao faithfully as she struggled to learn to dance. I want you to be able to dance properly when I leave, her sister had always said. Jinchi was looking at him intently. What is it, sir? She asked. I just didn't know you could dance. It is a basic subject of education where I grew up. I could not help but learn it, although admittedly I never became skilled enough to perform for a paying customer. She told him that sometimes, when celebrating a woman's departure, the number of dancers mattered more than their quality. When she said that, Jinchi looked out toward the distant lights of the pleasure district. The rumors are already starting beyond these walls. They say that eccentric bought out a courtesan. I imagine so. What is more, he has put in for leave. He plans to take off for 10 straight days. He does know how to cause trouble. Maomao suspected that tomorrow another new rumor would begin as well. She didn't know how much the old kook had spent on this banquet. But judging by the number of lanterns she could see from her perch on the wall, it far outstripped what anyone would spend on the average courtesan. Maomao's letter made it sound as though there would be feasting and celebrating for a solid week. So people would talk, who had known that it wasn't only the 3 princesses at the Verdigris house. Was there another courtesan there as well? Maomao still thought he should have taken Maomao. The sick woman, weakened by her illness, likely did not have much time left. She had lost her memories of long ago. All she could do now was sing children's songs and arrange ghost stones. But that man had found her, after the old lady had hidden her for many years. Maomao wished he hadn't, she thought. He could have chosen her wonderful sister instead. Maomao was full of talent and still beautiful. She would have made an excellent wife, but she is strange in her own ways. It was Maomao who first let the man the madam disliked into her room. Perhaps she thought it was the only thing to do with the strange person who continually pursued Maomao. When he was with Maomao, he did not do much of anything. He only talked endlessly about Maomao and the woman who had given birth to her. At times, he would sit before her go bored, but they never actually played a game together. Instead, the man would play one old game after another from memory. That is what Maomao told her. Maomao could not know for sure. Maybe Maomao was just being considerate of her. But it really did not matter to Maomao. She would have been happy enough to see Maomao go to that man. His personality aside, he had plenty of money. Her sister would not have wanted for anything in her life. Maomao wondered what there was not to like about her sister. Jinchi said, "I can't help wondering who in the world he bought out." He knew about the wager, but he hadn't imagined the celebrations would be so momentous. He was surprised to discover the man was even more eccentric than he had realized. "Yes, I wonder who it could be. Do you know?" In response, Maomao simply closed her eyes. "You do know, don't you? No woman he chose could be more gorgeous than you are, Master Jinchi. That's not what I asked." He does not deny it though, she thought. She suspected Jinchi was not the only one wondering. The whole palace, probably the whole capital, would be asking the same question. The courtesan for whom all this fuss was being made must be resplendently dressed. However, she would never appear in public. There would be only rumors, and they would only grow. People would ask themselves what woman could have so caught the eye of a man like him, and how beautiful she must be. Maomao thought the old hag would be pleased. People would be talking about the verdigris house for quite a while. Several officials would come knocking on the door, mostly out of curiosity. Maomao's whole body felt hot. Perhaps it was because she hadn't danced in a long time. Her feet tingled especially, and when she looked down she saw her skirt was tinged with red. "Oh shit," she said and grabbed up her skirt. "What are you doing?" Jinchi cried, his voice scratching. Maomao looked at her leg and made a face. The heat had become painful. Her experiments with medicines had lessened her awareness of sensations. She had believed the wound in her leg had healed well, but her dancing had reopened it. I guess it opened up again. You act as if it opened on its own. Do not worry, I will sew it right back up." Maomao searched among her discarded overgarments and found some disinfectant alcohol, a needle and thread. "Why are you so prepared for this exact situation? You never know." Maomao was about to make the first stitch when Jinchi grabbed the needle. "You cannot sew, sir," she said. "Do not do it here." He barely finished speaking when he lifted Maomao into his arms. Then he went down the wall skillfully without even using a ladder. Maomao was so surprised she did not even try to struggle. They reached the ground and she thought he would set her down. Instead, he continued to carry her, though he shifted her slightly in his arms. "What are you doing that for?" she asked. "It was becoming hard to hold you." "Then put me down, and let you make it worse." Jinchi pursed his lips. He held Maomao in his arms and she found their closeness uncomfortable. Her face was very close to his. How did she end up in these situations? She wondered. But she said, "What if someone sees us, sir?" "No one will see us. It is too dark." And also he lifted her slightly and adjusted his grip so she would not fall. "This is the second time I have held you like this." The second time, she thought. Oh, it must have been the day she injured her leg. She had been unconscious. Someone carried her away from where it happened. It would make sense if it had been Jinchi. That would mean he picked her up in front of everyone at the ceremony. But there was something more important, something she had been forgetting. She had meant to say it for a long time, and she deeply regretted not having said it sooner. She pressed a handkerchief to the blood that dribbled down her calf. "Master Jinchi," she began, "I know this is hardly an ideal moment, but if I may, there is something I have been meaning to say to you for quite a long time." "Why so formal all of a sudden?" Jinchi asked, somewhat perplexed. "Sir, I simply must say it." "Well then, out with it," Jinchi responded. "Very well," Maomao said, looking Jinchi full in the face. "Sir, please give me my ox bezoar." Jinchi's head connected with Maomao's with a thwack and she saw stars. A headbutt right out of the blue. It crossed her mind that perhaps he had only been leading her on the entire time. "Sir, don't tell me." "You don't have it, please. Surely you have a little more respect for me than that." Maomao looked at him questioningly. A slight smile crossed Jinchi's face. The rapid change in the eunuch's expression from annoyance to amusement reminded her how immature he could seem. She found him easier to talk to that way, she thought as she rocked in his arms. No one knew where the rumor started, but word was that a wealthy noble from the great country in the middle of the continent was buying every rare and unusual medicine he could find. It was during an afternoon tea party that Maomao first heard Jinchi's office was so full of get-well flowers he could hardly get inside. She took only one bite of her peach bun and commented, "Huh, bonus translator's notes. The Apothecary Diaries Volume 1. 2. Fishing for compliments. Welcome once again to the bonus page, or the bonus digital space notionally equivalent to a page, since you are presumably reading this in some non-physical form. Thanks for joining us for Volume 2 of the Apothecary Diaries. Last time I mentioned in passing the range of specialized vocabularies this series dips into. In this edition of the Apothecary Diaries, I would like to talk about some of the challenges these pose for the translation team. I want to focus on how the setting influences the translation process. I will use one example of relatively basic vocabulary and another, more complex question about how to render a term related to the setting in the English translation. When I began preparing to translate the Apothecary Diaries, one of the first things I did was explore sources for vocabulary related to the setting. This was after, of course, reading a bit of Volume 1 to get a feel for the writing style and what level of jargon we were likely to need to handle. The series is not set in a specific era of Chinese history, but the environment is clearly Chinese-influenced. Some familiarity with that general time and place and the language associated with it was obviously crucial. At first, I was particularly interested in two things. The first was what to call the main setting in English. The second was how to translate, which means consort. Ria Palace is a literal translation of the Japanese kukyu. This is written with the same characters used in Chinese. I wasn't sure if this expression was acceptable or current. I also wondered if there was a more common way to refer to this place or system in English. I know a little bit of Chinese, and I thought it might be more productive to search using the Mandarin term haogong instead of the Japanese equivalent. The very first result from my Google search was a Wikipedia page titled Imperial Chinese Harem System. As I mentioned in the previous book, the internet is truly a gift for translators. This page included a long list of ranking systems for the women in the imperial harem throughout various eras of Chinese history. The Apothecary Diaries isn't tied to any one time period, so no single list on the page perfectly matches the system in the series. It gave us a sense of how the rankings worked, though. We also learned about their relationships to the emperor and to each other. It helped clarify the reading and meaning of the term, which is kisaki or high in Japanese and fei in Chinese, but it didn't specifically make clear whether Ria Palace was standard English usage. Okay, I would do something else then. To make a long story short, I tried a few different search strings on Google Scholar, a Google subservice that specializes in academic papers, and found a handful of articles about women in imperial China. These articles helped confirm that the term Ria Palace is used by contemporary scholars. Furthermore, the footnotes in one of the articles referenced a book called A Dictionary of Official Titles in Imperial China by Charles Hucker. The title was very enticing, but this was one of those out-of-print scholarly books that would be too expensive to obtain. I also decided to do a Google search of the title, just in case it was on Google Books or something similar. It was not, but it was available, seemingly legitimately, on Harvard University's website. This book includes both translations and descriptions of a staggering number of ancient Chinese titles and offices. It is a treasure trove and was invaluable as Sasha, and I worked out the nomenclature for the various positions mentioned in our series. We did not use every translation from the dictionary exactly as written. Ensuring everything fit the intended meaning within the story was our main goal. However, we could not have asked for a better source to help us begin. That is how a translator might handle specialized vocabulary they are not already familiar with. We are discussing words related to the story setting. I want to focus on a word that appears in Volume 2. In an early scene introducing Lacan, we have this passage in the final translation. The man's name was Lacan, and he was a military commander. In a different era, he might have been considered a sleeping dragon, a great military mind waiting to be discovered. But in this day and age, he was just another eccentric. I want to focus on the segment A Sleeping Dragon, a great military mind waiting to be discovered. This entire clause translates a thought that in Japanese is simply stated as, he might have been called a taikubu. If you look up the word taikubu in an ordinary Japanese English dictionary, you are likely to find that it means a fisherman, maybe even an avid fisherman. Searching in Japanese makes things clearer. Taikubu refers to one person in particular, a historical figure from ancient China. In English, the most common names for this person are Lu Shang and Jiang Zia. As was common in ancient China, people frequently changed their names or took different names and titles throughout their lives. The story tells us that King Wen of Zhou, a very ancient Chinese state, found Lu Shang fishing. The king was impressed by the man's unusual method. Lu Shang did not use a hook at all. He simply recognized that the fish would come to him when they were ready.